And you found us. Happy New Year, everybody. I don't mean to sound kind of down, but I guess, I should be like exploding, right? If it's the new year. It is the second. But I mean, the news was just terrible on the first, of course, with first New Orleans, Bourbon Street, and then the news breaking about Las Vegas. There's something about the first of the year, New Year's Day, people who are prone to do things in a big way are ready to do it in their way. I refrained from talking about it because I didn't know. No one knew, right? We're all just still trying to piece together things. We just knew something happened in New Orleans really early in the morning on on the first after the New Year's Eve celebration, as it kept going in the night, and then Las Vegas happened the next morning, and I felt kind of down. I was gonna do some things. I was gonna go to a comedy club. I was gonna perform a set on January. I just didn't feel like it, and I think the other thing is, I'm going to a funeral tomorrow. And so the whole thing about 2025 is terror and death and just not very good. I wanted to begin this show because, this is kind of my personal podcast. I do it live. I call it my secret podcast. Welcome to Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable, and what is more considerable than life and death. Now, if you've been following the news, and I tried to refrain from watching as much news yesterday as I could, and I sort of caught up today when they knew more, and they tried to tie it all together. Oh, Las Vegas and New Orleans, maybe no, they're not. But there's some things they're not talking about that I'll bring up a little later. But then again, yesterday, there's also this sense that beyond the grief, this mass national grief that we had, I got a personal issue. I'm attending a funeral tomorrow, and I'm honoring a I guess, cousin by marriage, Kristopher Ian Ancheta. He was born January 5th. He didn't make it to January 5th. He died December 19th. He was still 34. He would have been 35 on the 5th. And we're burying him tomorrow. And I just want to honor him because he's one of those in the family that I didn't know as well. I wish I knew him as well because he was like me, born here, an American-born Filipino, trying to find his way, immigrant parents, but of a subsequent generation. He was the next generation of someone like me who's born here in America. Looks very Filipino. So when people look at us, they say, oh, you're not from the Philippines? Well, yeah, I am, kind of, yeah. I'm an American. I'm like you, if I'm talking to a white person. I'm like you, but I'm Filipino. I sound like you, but and Kristopher was that way. He was, Japanese have the term Nisei. We're going to talk about a famous Nisei who got honored today posthumously. That's later in the show. So Kristopher was, whenever I see him at parties, and there's always like one person in the family who loves to give parties. Thank goodness, my cousin Joyce loves to give parties. And that's where everyone gets together. Christenings, birthdays, anniversaries, everything. She's the social one. And then COVID hit and everything stopped. And then we just didn't see each other as much. But I remember one of these parties that we all the Guillermos and the Anchetas, we all got together. And I remember one of the best conversations I had was with Kristopher, because Kristopher was trying to find his way in America. And he found the path that he found was the path of all the other Guillermos dating back to the first Guillermos in the 1920s. When my father came, and my father and his brother, so Willie and Joe, came from the Philippines on that steamship, and they came to San Francisco, and they did not go into the valley because they did not want to work the fields. They wanted to go uptown and work in the restaurants and cook the vegetables. They were cooks. And they worked in some of the finer restaurants in San Francisco. They didn't go off and become the cooks in private homes, because then you had to double as houseboys, and then you had a houseboy driver. A lot of Filipinos in the 20s and 30s like that. But my dad and his brother Willie and Joe, they came here and they discovered food, restaurant work. That was where the Filipinos were, in the kitchens. And so when I would go to these parties, like in 2015, 16, around there, I'd see young Kristopher grow up in his 20s trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? He went into restaurant work. He went into the food business. He was a cook, and what a great cook. And you can see from his picture, he liked food. Make no mistake, he loved food. He loved food. And it was the driving force in his life. It was his career. He was a cook. I remember he got a job doing food at Twitter when that was a big perk. We feed our people good food, and there was Kristopher designing dishes and meals, and we would talk at the dining room buffet at these parties, and talking about food. He'd tell me about all the, not necessarily vegan. I was vegan, so I didn't eat the food, except I did have special dispensation for Filipino food at these gatherings. I mean, it's the only way that, you can still be, get the taste of Filipino in you. But we would talk about preparing, for example, that, the I don't even know the name of the dish, but, the raw, semi-raw calamari, squid, salads, and the dressings, and, because my dad was more pantry man than cook. And we would just compare notes, and he'd say, oh yeah, this is a good dish. And I'm not a cook. I mean, I'm more of an eater too. I used to be more of a cook when I was single, but my wife takes over all that now. And she's a great vegan chef, great vegan cook. But Kristopher was not vegan, but we didn't, it didn't come between us. What bonded us was he found this great joy in cooking, in food. And what I noticed is this was the lifeblood of Filipino families. My family in particular, the Guillermo family, worked their way up, union cooks, restaurants, and food was the thing that brought us together. I'd come back from the East Coast to visit my cousins and have dinner with my uncle. And for some reason, well, it was his specialty to make baked Alaska. Now, how many people have baked Alaska? I mean, that's a real, high end, continental restaurant kind of dish in the 1930s and 40s. But that was his thing. Oh, come back! I'll come and I'll make you baked Alaska. Oh yeah. No, never mind. But it was a big deal, and it used to upset my cousins. They said, "Oh, the meal's coming. Dad's gonna make baked Alaska again." But that was how we showed love. And so when I talked to Kristopher, I was always enchanted by his stories, talking about his passion for food, talking about how he loved cooking and how he loved preparing food. And it's not like how he loved eating it. Clearly he loved eating it, but he loved preparing and making food for people he loved and for strangers who came and got to know and love him as the person behind these dishes. I have to say that because of the pandemic, one of the things about what the pandemic did, I don't want to say it destroyed our family, but being apart made it hard for people to really get together. And so I don't think I had another conversation with Kristopher since 2019, the beginning of the pandemic. 2020, 21, we start going outside 2022, didn't see them in 2022, didn't see them in 2023. When we really started coming out, that's 4 years there. 2024, there's 5 years. Last year, we just got into the whole COVID thing and we didn't see each other. We didn't see any of those cousins. And then I get a message from my sister a week ago saying that Kristopher had passed. And this is a current picture. I haven't seen, when I saw him, he wasn't as well groomed. He's wearing a hoodie, but he was, he's just a little, he wasn't, there he's, he's got his hair cut, he's sharp, he looks happy. He looks happy. When I met him, or when I would talk to him, he was just, coming from work or hanging out. He just was just a kid. And then that's the thing. His life was in front of him. And I say his life was in front of him. He was still growing and figuring out things. But he was going to be 35 on January 1st. Certainly by 35, you've got your path. You've got your sights set on what you're doing. And I think he did. It was in the food business. And I wish I could have had one more conversation with him. Kristopher in Ancheta. So tomorrow, I'll probably replay this because I'll be at the funeral. And I know when I see many of the people there, they'll look at me and say, hey, I'm looking at a ghost. I'm saying me, not Kristopher. But I look forward to seeing them because this is what brings families together. When someone passes on, we all step forward. And so that's tomorrow. I'll be in San Francisco, and it will be sad. Like I said, the last time I talked to Kristopher about anything real, and it's not that we had this heart-to-heart conversation, but we would see each other at these parties and talk over the buffet. We wouldn't talk over a meal. On a meal, but we would talk over the buffet, and we would say, "Oh wow, look at this! This is great tasting, this and that." And he'd talk about things that he prepared, and then we'd talk about his cousin's dessert. His aunt, my cousin, made the greatest Filipino desserts. Learned from her mom. The biko, the babinkas, the cassava, everything. There was a whole table just with those, ubi this, ubi that. And then the pandemic hit, and we haven't been in touch. We've been in pandemic mode. because sometimes it's just hard enough to keep up with your own life, as opposed to expand out to the extendeds. Although the circle got smaller, certainly during the pandemic, and now that the pandemic is over, it needs to expand again. So the new year, Christmas and the new year really changed by this personal tragedy. But now the whole country's in a kind of funk because of New Orleans, because of Las Vegas. They don't seem to be connected, in terms of, they consulted one another. They're working in tandem. They seem to be totally separate, right? Which is, it's sad, because this is how people express their anger in America now. More people use a vehicle as a weapon now. I mean, it'll make you nostalgic about knives and guns. But this is bad. This is bad. They say, all right, the FBI says the driver in New Orleans acted alone and was 100% inspired by the Islamic State group. And the thing about that guy, he was a U.S. Army veteran, right? Who had fallen on some hard times. He was in real estate. He has let his real estate license lapse. I mean, the real estate business has not been good. High interest rates. He had some other troubling financial details that have been reported. And initially he was going to take out his family from some reports. But the key thing in the New Orleans story is he was a U.S. Army veteran. A patriot. Radicalized. And then you go to the Las Vegas story, the Tesla Cybertruck versus the Ford 150 Cybertruck in New Orleans. I mean, electric vehicles, they have pep. 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. Right? I mean, so even the F-150 electronic vehicle in New Orleans had a lot of get up and go. But then now the Tesla Cybertruck they used in Las Vegas, because it had, it was almost impregnable. It kind of guided where the blast went, upwards and not out. And so the facade at the Trump Hotel was spared. Now, no broken windows in the front. But the key thing in the Las Vegas story is the person who died inside the Tesla appears to be an active duty U.S. Army Green Beret. I mean, when you think about that, oh my God, a U.S. active duty Green Beret? Yeah. Soldier shot self in head before Cybertruck exploded outside Trump's Las Vegas hotel. Officials say that was at the press conference today. They identified Matthew Livelsberger. Matthew Livelsberger, a Green Beret. And this is the thing about all our assumptions about who the terrorists are or who are the people who might be radicalized. Now, maybe the guy in Las Vegas, or maybe the guy in New Orleans, you'd say, oh, yeah, he'd be radicalized. Look at his name. You say, Shamsuddin Jabbar, 42. Yeah, he's clearly Islamic, was radicalized, but apparently You know, you wouldn't know. And then in Las Vegas, it's Matthew Livelsberger, a Green Beret. A Green Beret. These are the guys we rely on. In the meantime, juxtapose that with the reaction from Donald Trump. I mean, I refrained from saying anything yesterday because we didn't know. We knew nothing. And that's the thing about when things like this happen. You know, we know nothing, and so all you could do is speculate, right? All you could do is speculate why, and say, and the only thing I could say definitively yesterday is that here in America, we kick off the new year, and here's an American constant: violence. And that's what we use to bring on 2025. And we're still trying to figure out why, the motivations, the grievances of the perpetrators, but the deeper why are we at this sort of juncture again? Why are we at this juncture of violence in America again? And it's hard to say, because, well, New Orleans was a soft target because that's where people like to celebrate, Bourbon Street. And some guy, it appears now, Livelsberger really just wanted to commit suicide with and create as big a splash as possible, which he did. But I'm sure he didn't know what was going on with, or maybe he did, I don't know, because he was in Las Vegas 3 hours after the first reports at 3 a.m. in the morning Eastern time in New Orleans. And again, we have a wake-up call during a time when no one wants to be woke. What are we to do? Absolutely nothing? Or do we do something? I think we should try to do something, but I don't know if anyone has the courage to do anything at this point. I mean, that's the troubling thing. I mean, Donald Trump, he only links it to the things that he wants to talk about, which is the fact that he's so against, Biden's border policies. He's so against immigration. He's trying to tie what happened in New Orleans with that, and has used Fox to spread the misinformation that there was some kind of immigration thing here going on with Shamsuddin Jabbar. But Shamsuddin Jabbar was born in Beaumont, Texas, was an American. I don't even know if it was his parents who were immigrants, or if he was just, an Islamic person who was suddenly radicalized. I don't know his background beyond, his birth in Beaumont. Then he lived in Houston, tried to make it as a business person in real estate, failed. And then he was ripe for radicalization. And then we see what happened on Bourbon Street. Has nothing to do with immigration policy. So that should be said. Donald Trump is wrong to try to link it. Anyone who tries to link it to immigration. Oh, and Donald Trump said a lot of things about that. That one, let's see. Donald Trump in the Truth Social post said, with the Biden open borders policy, I said many times during rallies and elsewhere that radical Islamic terrorism and other forms of violent crime will become so bad in America that it'll become hard to even imagine or believe. All right, well, maybe, but that's not because of an open borders policy. That time has come, only worse, he says. Let's see. That time has come, only worse than ever imagined. Joe Biden is the worst president in the history of America. A complete and total disaster. What he and his group of election interfering thugs have done to our country. Always comes back to that. You see, this is the president-elect. Instead of something consoling, instead of something to try to bring us together, Donald Trump makes it about immigration and gets it wrong, because Shamsuddin Jabbar in New Orleans was not an immigrant. He was an American citizen born in Beaumont, Texas. Now, what is important to note, Jabbar was in the Army, an Army veteran, and Livelsberger in Las Vegas is an active duty Green Beret. That's what you need to concentrate on. That there are people within our armed forces or who have had the training as U.S. military who are susceptible to radicalization. I mean, that may just be a fear we can't face up to right now. Because, well, there are a lot of people in the military, but, you know, they shuttle in and out. But you would hope that these people who serve are the super patriots. They're the ones that you count on. I mean, Shamsuddin Jabbar went to college on the GI Bill, for goodness sakes. And he was radicalized. We don't know enough about Livelsberger in Las Vegas yet, but he was active duty, Green Beret. And maybe it was his sense that he would go out there to Las Vegas, to the Trump Hotel in a Musk vehicle, a Tesla Cybertruck, and it was kind of like a destination suicide. So isolated, we hope, but there are signs that show that they were all radical. They're both radicalized in some way. And what is the response? What is the response? Trump tries to tie it to immigration. Nah, that's not it. Maybe there's some kind of psychological thing that we need to undergo with people who are serving in the military. I know, but no one's talking about it. No, I mean, it's there, and no one wants to connect the dot. That the people that we rely on to protect us, to serve us, might be prone to doing things that will hurt us. How do we stop that? I don't know. Trump immediately wants to curtail immigration. Like that's the scapegoat. That's not really the way. That's not going to solve anything. But it's nice to say. It gives Trump something to say, and you know, and people. The problem is people might be apt to believe Donald Trump, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't believe Donald Trump. In the meantime, New Orleans, trying to go on like nothing has happened, I suppose that's the best way. After yesterday, they say there's no place safer than New Orleans. They're playing the game now, and I was going to take a peek at the Georgia game and the Notre Dame game because I like Notre Dame. I like Georgia a little bit. But, you know, the game that was really good was the Texas Arizona State game. Man, Arizona State came back from the dead. And then the Oregon game was interesting because the Asian American guy, Gabriel, just didn't have it. Oregon just didn't have it yesterday. But, we're too distracted because of everything happening in New Orleans and then Las Vegas to even think about football. I mean, it just went on, but I was just kind of in a daze. And then, as I said, I'm thinking about poor Kristopher. We're burying tomorrow, which is, I guess, it's in keeping with where we are as a country. Our framework. Well, we try to keep positive, try to stay positive. We mourn, but we go forward. I mean, I think we have to. And, we have lives lost. We have trust broken, on a national level in terms of the people who are supposed to protect us. And we need as a people to demand something, at least on the security level, right? Because we have to work together instead of trying to politicize this. I'm not trying to politicize this to the extent that Donald Trump is. I'm just saying, how do we make it work so that, usually on moments like this, we pull together. We're on the same team. What's odd is that the people who we thought would be protecting us, members of the military, people who've been through military training, were among those radicalized and who carried out some things that really marred the beginning of the year, January 1st, 2025. So let's hope things get better. Joe Biden is doing what he can in the final days of his presidency. I mean, Joe Biden is he honored a number of people with the Medal of Honor, right? The Citizens Medal of Honor. And it included an Asian American who many people don't really know about. And I'm talking about Mitsuye Endo, who she died in 2006. But she was an American woman of Japanese descent who was placed in an internment camp in World War II. She filed a writ of habeas corpus that led ultimately to the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that the U.S. government could not continue to detain a citizen who was conceitedly loyal to the United States, her words. Mitsuye Endo. Born in Sacramento, she died in Chicago in 2006. She was 85. And she was the second of 4 children, the Endo family. Her father worked as a fishmonger. She grew up in an English-speaking Methodist home. I'm reading from her bio because I'm sure a lot of people don't know about Mitsuye Endo. Mitsuye Endo Tsutsumi. And she graduated from Sacramento High School. She was a typist for the DMV in Sacramento. And it's one of the few things that you could do because Japanese Americans at the time couldn't enter into many fields because of discrimination. And then she was moved to the Topaz War Relocation Center in Utah, incarcerated, not really interned, but incarcerated. And then she filed her suit that ultimately led to the closure of the internment camps. So, I mean, a lot of people know of other names, more famous men. But many people don't know about Endo. And she's called the woman behind the landmark lawsuit that ultimately led to the closing of the concentration camps. And this is from the website Densho. It said, she enlisted a lawyer named James Purcell, who challenged her being fired from her job when the internment hit. And then she was sent to Tule Lake, California, and then ultimately to Utah, as I said. Let's see, I'm reading this. She filed that habeas corpus petition, and starting with his civil service plaintiffs. Let's see. So Purcell is the lawyer, James C. Purcell. He never met Endo, but he was her lawyer. And they started with her because she had a brother in the army and had never been to Japan. So she was a good plaintiff. And at first she was hesitant to be part of this suit. She said, I agreed to do it at that moment because they said it's for the good of everybody. And so I said, well, if that's it, I'll go ahead and do it. So she had to be convinced by this lawyer, Purcell, who filed the petition July 12, 1942 in San Francisco, that would begin this chain of legal events that would end up in the Supreme Court in favor in December 1944. With her suit, or while her suit went through the various courts, she remained confined, moving to Topaz, Utah after the segregation. She had the opportunity to leave camp early. The government offered to release her in part to moot the lawsuit. She opted to remain in camp. When her suit was finally decided, she left Topaz, Utah in May of 1945 to live with a sister who'd resettled with her husband in Chicago. She took a job as a secretary for the Mayor's Committee on Race Relations in Chicago. 2 years later, she married Kenneth Tsutsumi, whom she had met in camp, and they went on to have 3 children. In subsequent years, she kept a low profile, rebuffing interview requests with the exception of a very brief oral history that appeared in the anthology And Justice for All in 1984. Because she was victorious in her suit, she was not a part of the coram nobis cases of the 1980s that brought renewed attention and fame to 3 other legal resistors. Now that's sort of what I was trying to get at. We know about Hirabayashi, we know about Fred Korematsu, we know about Min Yasui, but Endo was victorious in her case, but it was often forgotten. And it was the Korematsu case in the 80s that got attention. And according to Densho, which is an Asian American, Japanese American historical site, even her own daughter didn't know of her role in history until learning about it in her 20s. So Mitsuye Endo Tsutsumi lived in Chicago the rest of her life. Died of cancer April 14th, 2006. And only today, 18 years after, she's being remembered for being a plaintiff in this landmark lawsuit that ultimately led to the closing of the concentration camps. So Mitsuye Endo, we remember her one of Joe Biden's final acts, the remaining weeks, he gave this citizens medal to Liz Cheney and also to Benny Thompson, the two members of the House of Representatives who headed up the January 6th committee. And that's going to be important because if Trump overturns their work, I think it's important that we realize the importance of what they did, that it doesn't diminish. If Trump pardons the insurrectionists, we can't diminish the work of the January 6th committee because their work lives on. It's archived, it's history, and we need to understand and learn it. That people are being pardoned. Well, we speculate. Trump has hinted that they'll be pardoned. We'll see. We'll see who doesn't. I mean, it's not like the pardons of Joe Biden the other day, where people on death row were just allowed to live. They weren't released. They were allowed to live. It was humane. But it was also in keeping with the law. You might have heard that, when Joe Biden pardoned death row inmates a week or so ago, a lot of criticism came in that, what a Christmas gift to the victims and the victims' families. Well, taking the perps off death row is probably more humane, while still honoring justice and honoring the victims. It was humane and fair. January 6th, let's see what kind of balance Trump strikes if all he does is pardon people who took part violently in the insurrection that ended up in the deaths of law enforcement. We'll see how he balances things there. But from his remarks so far, he says, watch me on the first day. Well, a blanket pardon? That's why it was important today for Biden to give the Presidential Citizens Medal to Thompson and to Liz Cheney for their work in getting to the truth. I mean, you get the video, you have the testimony, we have the convictions. Are we going to let the truth that they found be undone by whatever Trump does on his first day? Let's hope not. So, all right. So Biden did a lot today. This is just today. He did the President's Citizenship Medal. He honored Mitsuye Endo Tsutsumi posthumously, which I think the lesson with Tsutsumi is that you're caught in a situation where you are the perfect plaintiff. She won her case. And frankly, I've been studying Asian American history. This is one aspect that I didn't realize. Her case went forward. She won, led to the closing of the camps. But the other guys, Hirabayashi, Korematsu, the three men, they're the most famous cases because it was brought up in the 80s. And when more people were paying attention, I guess that's it. The Korematsu case. Whereas Endo's case was in the soon after World War II. soon after World War II ended. Anyway, all right, so I think that's it. I mean, I'll repeat this show tomorrow on Friday because, and I'll try to get Dan Gonzalez on maybe over the weekend. We'll talk, but look for that. You can always find me on patreon.com/Emil Amok, on substack.com/@Emil Amok. A lot happening, really, but emotionally, it's been a kind of tough couple of days. From 31st wasn't that bad. Although on the 31st, I did do that New Year's Eve event, telling an excerpt of my trans dad story, and it actually took a lot out of me. I mean, I was really surprised that I was. In the end, I was very emotional. And Brandy Carlisle's song, The Joke, I listened to that, and it was so emotional. I was listening to that, and then the song of the season for me was my discovery of the Pogues' Fairy Tale of New York, which I thought I'd heard, but I guess I hadn't. My goodness. It's like, if you haven't heard Fairy Tale of New York, Christmas song. It's a Christmas song that you can listen to 365 days a year and just remind you about your feelings. Anyway, so there. Listen to that. I listened to Brandy Carlisle's The Joke, and I was just so emotional. And this is after I'd given after I told my story. And so the New Year's Eve was just kind of filled with different emotions. And then New Year's Day, we got the bombing, and then we shall remember Kristopher, whose funeral I'm going to tomorrow, Friday. He was a good guy, and I just regret that I did not get to know him better than I did, because he was doing it in the food world. And he had a perspective. Kristopher Ian Ancheta would have been 35 on the 5th. Died December 19th to make it to his 35th. All right. We end our show today with a little loving kindness, right? Because love makes the world go round. I'm going to see people tomorrow for the first time at the funeral. And you know what? The miracle in life is forgiveness, right? Forgiveness. So we're going to be open and forgiving and loving. That's often the only way to go. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Till next time, Mahal Kita.